Okay, we're going to do chapter 7 on pop culture, popular culture, that kind of thing. And so, like, the first thing, maybe you can see this on the PowerPoint, maybe you can't, it's really small, but these are actually the top 10 grossing movies worldwide, like most money made worldwide. Now, it's not the American version, if that would be a different list, but these are the ones that have been marketed across the world. So I'm curious, who's seen these movies? Like, have you seen Avatar? And you guys in here can just, like, nod or raise your little hand. Avatar, Titanic, The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. These girls haven't seen anything. The Dark Knight, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Pirates of the Caribbean at World End, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So if I have this right, the girls in this room have, only one of them has seen the Harry Potter movies, and then you've not seen any of these other things. Not even Titanic?
I've seen Titanic.
Oh, Titanic. But you've not. Oh my goodness. There are so many people normally whenever we do this that, there are at least 5 people in every class that have seen every single one of these. And I've seen all of them except for the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. I've just never seen them. It kind of goes to show, like, and if you look at this, although some of them are based on other parts of the world or filmed in other areas, Lord of the Rings in New Zealand, or Harry Potter's actually from a Scottish writer, these were all produced and directed by Americans or by Hollywood. Like, they're Hollywood films, they're American films. And so how do we, if you look at the last lecture, the last thing we talked about in chapter 6 was how we experience different cultural spaces. And we said traveling and migration. But another way that we experience other cultures and other spaces is by pop culture. You know things about places in the world without ever having gone there. Mostly because you've either seen pictures or a magazine or a commercial or something along the lines that are usually the Olympics, even that, the way they portray the things that are going on is pop culture. There's this media influence in pop culture. When I say pop culture, first let's define it by 4 characteristics. There are 4 characteristics of pop culture, and you'll need to remember this list. This is kind of the only listing thing from chapter 7. The first one is that it's produced by cultural industries. What I mean by that is a culture industry or cultural industry is one that works within the capitalist system that basically sees the products of pop culture as profit. So, and I'll say that again, a cultural industry is one that works within the capitalist system that sees the products of pop culture as a commodity to be sold for profit, like a way to make money. Basically saying they're looking at the current culture and figuring out a way to make money from it. Think about Disney. Disney is probably the largest cultural industry in the world, and they have Disney Worlds and Disneylands in many, many countries. We have 2 in America. And you just think about, like, how they have really capitalized on being able to take something like a movie or an idea or a cartoon or a character, any character, and create an entire industry on this, right? They've just been able to really make a lot of money. I mean, imagine the money Disney makes off of just the idea of their princesses, right? They take these princesses from these different movies, these different films, but it's so much more. Cinderella is so much more than a character in a movie, right? I mean, it's everything. You can buy the clothes, you can buy, baby dolls to dress up like Cinderella, to dress up like you so you can dress like Cinderella. And I mean, they just have birthday party stuff. I mean, you can do so many things with Cinderella. So it's the idea that pop culture takes something and it is for profit. I mean, there's some sort of profit coming out of it. And it's produced by those industries that want to make the money. So even tabloids are making money from current events that are going on. The second one, it's kind of weird to say, but it's different from folk culture. It's not folk culture. So to tell you what a definition is by saying what it's not seems kind of backwards to me. But we have pop culture, we have just general cultural terms that we talked about, like a way of life, or a way of people living. And then we also have high culture, which we talked about earlier in the semester, about high culture is when you have like the symphony, the opera, the very elite sort of cultured idea, going to the opera, the ballet, those kind of things. Folk culture refers to the traditional rituals that maintain a group identity, right? It's those things that don't change over time, and we have like festivals for them. So like Oktoberfest, Celtic Fest, Greek Fest, we have those just even in the Jackson area. And when you go to these festivals, you can sort of see people wearing the traditional clothing, you can try traditional foods, traditional drinks, play traditional games, learn the traditional dances. And those, when I say traditional, I mean those things that are really rooted in history. They haven't changed. It's what people would have done 100 or 200 years ago. And that's what folk culture is. And so pop culture, it's not that. It's not rooted in tradition. It's not rooted in some sort of history. It's constantly the now, the cool, the popular thing to do. The third thing is that it's everywhere, which is pretty self-explanatory. Pop culture is everywhere. Television, radio, movie theaters, advertisements, commercials, magazines, books even. It's really difficult to avoid. There are people who say, oh, I hate TV. I hate reality TV. Ugh. And then you start to talk to them and you're like, you really hate all reality TV? Maybe you're not the reality TV guru that like watches everything, but you don't watch a single reality TV show? Like nothing? So you either go, like some people go the route of like Biggest Loser. They like the health reality TV shows. Some people like the competition stuff like Amazing Race or Survivor. Some people like the romantic stuff like The Bachelor. Some people like lifestyle stuff like Sister Wives or Duck Dynasty, right? Things like that are just following people and keeping up with the Kardashians, like that kind of thing. There's, even within the idea of reality TV, there's so many. That's just been something that's been really popular in the last 15 years, and it's just blown up. But even just standing in the checkout line, you can see what's going on in the world, like or what's going on with popular people in the world. Who's pregnant, who's breaking up, who's getting together, who's getting married, who's leaving American Idol, or whatever. So it's kind of, it's really just difficult to avoid. It's kind of everywhere. But why is it everywhere? The fourth characteristic, and some tend to disagree, but it fills a social function. That's the fourth thing. It fills a social function. Usually that social function is just something to talk about, like it's a discussion starter, small talk kind of thing. Oh, what books are you reading? Oh, what movies have you seen lately? That kind of thing. You may talk with friends about what's going on. My friend made a funny comment on Facebook the other day. She said, I just realized, she said this, I just realized that my husband texts his friends back and forth during a baseball game, like to talk about like what's happening on the baseball game, like Major League Baseball. And she goes, what if I did that while I was watching Downton Abbey? Mm-hmm. And so she's like texting her friends going, OMG, look at that dress, or I can't believe you did that, just kind of talking about that idea that we're really connected even through something like that. And so we can also discuss important social events based on things you learn in the news. It doesn't have to be stupid stuff like look at the dress. It doesn't have to be surface level things like what is Kim Kardashian doing now. It doesn't have to be about that. It can be more serious events that are kind of occurring. Yesterday was a terrible tornado in Oklahoma, and I heard this on the radio on the way here, that the season finale of a show called Mike and Molly, I don't watch Mike and Molly, but they pulled the season finale and didn't show it last night because it had a tornado in it, like that was part of the storyline, and so they pulled it, and out of sensitivity to what was going on in the world. So it's kind of like pop culture even reacts and responds to what's happening in real life. And think about your home growing up. think about how many people lived there and how many TVs were there. Sometimes people are like, we had one TV for 7 people, and sometimes they say, you know, there were 5 people living in that house and we had 7 TVs, you know, one in every room, or did you have a TV in your bedroom? That idea comes up a lot about how much do you want to be included in things like TV, or do you have magazine subscriptions, or you know, pull up things like on the internet, and what do you think about people who don't have cable or TiVo or DVR? Like, how backwoods or out of touch are they? Speaking of the social function and the internet, one of my friends was really embarrassed to say this. She was really funny about it, but she said she really likes reading gossip, cheesy pop culture websites, like Us Weekly or something like that. And she was like, but for her, you know, she has kids, for her it's like that time to just like veg out. Like, that's her, I don't have to use my brain, I don't have to do much. Like, that's the social function it's filling for her. So for some people, it's just like an escape, even if only for a little bit at a time. So that's what I mean by number 4, filling a social function. There are a couple of reactions to pop culture. The people who were kind of responding to it, you can either consume or resist it. I think because there's a negative connotation when we say pop culture, when we say certain things. We like to pretend like, oh, I resist it, you know, I'm not going to consume this. My husband really does resist it, but not in a like angry way or anything. It's just not interesting to him. I was watching, I consume it. I tend to be like, I need veg time. Like, I just kind of that same way my friend is. I may watch, but I'm kind of more of a TV watcher or Netflix watcher. I'll kind of watch a season of something, and we don't have cable, but we do have Netflix, and that's really great. And now everything comes on the internet. Like, you can watch, and you know, so many things the next day on the internet. But I was watching something on TV, and I'll have the TV on just for noise. Like, that's me, and he's more of the quiet person. So he came in, and I was doing something on the computer, but the TV was on, and it was on some kind of like music special, you know, one of the, like CBS or something. The only thing that was on, I think it was like a Tim McGraw music special. And he came in, he was like, he likes to, you know, make jokes or act, you know, pretend like he knows, and he goes, I can't remember who he said. He said something. He asked if that was a certain country singer, like, is that, who would he have said? I don't even know, because he doesn't know many country singers. And I was like, no, that is not so-and-so. He was like, is it Keith Urban? I was like, no, it's not Keith Urban, you know. And I was like, it's Tim McGraw. He's like, oh, yeah, that's Tim McGraw. And so then he makes he's like, isn't he married to another famous singer? I was like, Faith Hill from Mississippi, really? So, I mean, there are some people who are really clueless about, and Tim is probably one of them, who are just kind of clueless about popular people, right? But maybe he does get into certain shows or like very specific pick and choose kind of things. His reason is sort of that he just doesn't have time for that, and it's not as interesting to him. So, but we typically, most people actually end up consuming it in one way or the other at different levels of consumption. We're bombarded by it, right? Number 2, it's everywhere. Or number 3, it's everywhere. So it's hard not to. There are actually even those reader watcher profiles for the TV. Companies use these to kind of like target you based on certain demographics. Like the commercials in the Super Bowl are not the commercials that are shown on Disney Junior, you know, or I mean, MTV does not show the same stuff as NBC. Like, they're completely different groups of people. Even if you go from one news station to the other, if you go from like a liberal news station to a conservative news station, like, they know what types of products you're willing to buy or that kind of thing. So like even commercials. Why do we like this stuff? You know, why are we interested? Why do we need to be entertained? That's what some people would say. What happened to good old-fashioned reading? Well, reading is also pop culture, right? Especially unless you're reading the classics all the time. If you're reading any of the new stuff, then it's pop culture as well. It's just part of this entertainment. But we can and we do sometimes resist pop culture. Sometimes it could be just, like in Tim's case, he doesn't have a lot of time for it, so he doesn't, you know, he kind of does other things with his time. But sometimes it's more of a personal reason, like I've got something against it. I've had people say, you know, the things that it's showing are not they don't match my value system, so I don't watch it because I feel that, you know, it's bringing me down in a way, or have people who've said, I don't watch it because I disagree with their politics, or I disagree with the subliminal message that they think they're passing. In the 90s, in the early to mid-90s, the whole Southern Baptist Convention boycotted Disney for a while because Disney supported homosexuals, and they had like a homosexual day at the parks where, you know, they kind of just allowed like a homosexual parade, like a gay pride kind of thing. And so the Southern Baptist Convention was like, we're not going to support a company and industry that, you know, would support that. Well, that really just that didn't last. I mean, it lasted a couple of years, which is a pretty good thing, but it's almost like Disney's bigger than that, right? And so there are all these little Baptist kids who haven't seen Cinderella, and so they give that up. But I mean, there was a reason for the boycott. And so what are some I want you to ask yourself, you know, what is a reason you would boycott something? There are also those group reasons, like the Southern Baptist Convention that you may take a part of, or something like, we're not going to eat at this restaurant for this long, or we're not going to do this activity or read these magazines until they change this. So there are kind of group activities too. There's a list of books that have been banned in the chapter on page 212, and like if you read the titles, some of them you'll be like, oh, I understand why that's been banned. These are the top 20 banned books over the past 20 years worldwide, so it's not just in America. But Impressions by Jack Booth, Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger, The Adventures of Huck Finn, and that's an interesting one we'll come back to at different times. The Chocolate War by Robert Cormier, Bridge to Terabithia by Catherine Patterson. I loved that book. I haven't seen the movie yet, but Scary Stories in the Dark, and More Scary Stories in the Dark by Alvin Schwartz, The Witches by Roald Dahl, Daddy's Roommate by Michael Will Hoyt, Curses, Hexes, and Spells by Daniel Cohen, A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle. I just hurts my feelings that they would boycott that. How to Eat Fried Worms by Thomas Rockwell, Blubber by Judy Blume, Revolting Rhymes, again by Roald Dahl. He's the guy that wrote The Witches. So, Halloween ABCs, A Day No Pigs Would Die by Robert Beck, Heather Has Two Mommies by Leslie Newman, Christine by Stephen King, and I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. There's some real classics on that list, right? There are some obvious, like, Halloween-y, scary kind of stories. There's obviously some with themes of homosexuality, but, you know, Of Mice and Men, Huck Finn, Bridge to Terabithia, A Wrinkle in Time, How to Eat Fried Worms, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Like, some of these are kid books, you know. It doesn't say why they've each been banned, but that is sort of an interesting concept of who would ban books, and specifically these books, for different reasons. The Huck Finn thing, there's been a lot of controversy around lately because it says the N-word throughout it. And so there's 3 philosophies on it. There is leave the book exactly like it is. You can choose to read it or not, but if you do choose to read it, you can just talk about the N-word. You can talk about it with your students. Option 2, take the N-word out and change it. Like, change the word every time it's in the book to something different, and leave it that way. Or 3, just put like a black mark through it in the text, so like print it with it marked out so that you can't actually see the word, but it would just be like a blank space that's there. A lot of people argue about changing the book at all. They feel that if you're going to read it, you know, these literary purists, you read it the way Mark Twain wrote it. Mark Twain isn't here to say to change it, so there's some of that going on. So it's kind of interesting. When you think about it, and this is kind of going on to the next slide, pop culture representing different groups, we're usually introduced to other cultures through the lens of pop culture. We get to see their lives in a movie and a book. So you're reading The Joy Luck Club about Chinese American women or girls. And in the book, and then also in the movie rendition, you'll get to see inside their house, right? Like when they go home, there'll be a conversation that they have with their parents between just the two of them. Or you'll get to see in the movie inside their home of what it would look like. And usually there are people who are experts of that culture showing the representation, make sure the decorations look right or what's going on. Well, if you were to go to Chinatown in New York, you would not get to see the children and hearing what they're saying to their parents. You would not get to see inside their homes, right, unless you're visiting a friend. And so a lot of times we get to really look inside a culture in a way that we wouldn't if we just traveled there. So if we watch a movie like Slumdog Millionaire, we see inside the slums and Born into Brothels in India. You get to see inside the slums visually much more than you would if you were visiting as, you know, Americans and going to travel to India, right? You're getting to see a different part of it. You know, at the same time, this representation is not always correct. There are certain cultural groups that tend to be misrepresented or represented in a negative light. When I went to China in 2003, there was a black girl from Chicago in my group. There were 7 teachers, a black girl from Chicago, and everybody had 2 things to say about her in the town that we were in. And we were in a very small town, so this would not have happened in like Beijing or Shanghai or something. We were in a really tiny town. But they all had 2 questions for her, but they didn't have for us. One, does she know Michael Jordan? She's black and she's from Chicago. She must know Michael Jordan, right? They love basketball. A lot of people love basketball in China. And then 2, does she have a gun? They just automatically think, well, why? Most African Americans are misrepresented as dangerous in the movies. And so if that's all you have ever seen of African Americans, there's an automatic fear there, right? So you have to be really careful that the same thing's happening to us. If we watch a movie about Chinese people and we don't know any Chinese people. We watch a movie about Indians and we don't know any Indians. We watch a movie about Africans and we don't know any Africans. That same thing is happening. Like, it's giving us a picture and we should take the good, but we should realize that it could also foster stereotypes. So yes, we're seeing something that we wouldn't be able. So I mean, you know, it's really this controversial thing of whether or not you should look at pop culture as an in to culture in general. Obviously, I lean a little bit more towards it because I give you extra credit for reading books and watching movies because I think they're just eye-opening. I think it just gives you something to think about. I don't want you to read these books or watch these movies and put all these people in a box, right? Or watch all of it and think that this is what's going on. Sometimes without pop culture, we might not know anything about it. Have you heard of the Navajo Wind Talkers? There's a movie called Wind Talkers with, I think, Nicolas Cage. Well, they were like huge in the code talking in the military in the World War II, I believe, where we use the Navajo code to like send messages that couldn't be translated. So like we sent messages about where to go or what the war was going to be or what our next move was, the Navajo talkers would send that message because no one else could translate it. That wasn't a language that the Germans knew or something like that. Well, I wouldn't know anything about that if I had not seen the movie and made me more interested and showed. And sometimes it gives this credibility. Is it good or bad? You know, maybe it's both. We also tell new students who are coming to America to watch TV and to watch movies because you pick up on the humor of the culture, you pick up on like the slang and the other words being said. So I don't know, but it absolutely can lead to stereotyping. So there's that good and bad thing about using pop culture as an in to understanding other cultures. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Now, the United States is the largest distributor of movies and TV shows and etc., but we're not really the only ones. We do get a lot of things from other places, like James Bond from England, or other comedies from Britain, like The Office is originally from Britain. Japanese anime has gotten really popular in America. So there are definitely pop culture things that are influenced by Americans. But there is this idea of cultural imperialism. Now go with me here for a minute. This is kind of our last point on Chapter 7. There's this idea of cultural imperialism, which is basically, and simply put, pushing your cultural identity and other like cultural goods into foreign markets. So we talked about imperialism, we talked about colonialism, like pushing your stuff into the global economy, and we talked about having this cultural identity in the cultural industries that make money for pop culture. Well, like cultural imperialism is basically taking American culture, pop culture, and pushing it into foreign markets and trying to really like make money overseas by doing this. Now, we absolutely do this. We make a lot of money overseas by our movies, and one of the things that other countries love about the idea of America is just Hollywood. Like they just think, you know, Hollywood. We started this actually in the 1920s with the hope that if we could get the American face out there, that we would sell more products overseas. So we would do things like put a beautiful girl, an American Hollywood idea, or we would send a film overseas, you know, like even if it's a silent film with these beautiful women in it, these beautiful American women, and then we would try to sell cars, like Ford motor cars, with these same beautiful women driving them or, you know, modeling next to them. So we have this idea that like you want the American thing because look at how great the American thing is. Like we sell the idea of it. This is called cultural imperialism. This is one way that people have actually argued that America has become a superpower. Yes, we have money and finances and things like that, but we haven't always, right? We have size, but we haven't always. I mean, we're competing in the world globally as a superpower with countries that have been here for thousands of years, right? And we're really, really young. And we are considered a superpower. And a lot of people would say that the reason we're considered a superpower is because of our reputation and because of this want to be an American, this want to come to America, want to see this land. Why do people want to come to America? Why do they want to see this land? Well, we have put our face out there. We have sent Hollywood all over the world and made it very, very attractive to people. And so, so it's kind of an interesting idea that we've become a superpower through pop culture and what's popular, movies, books, just pictures, pretty women, the glamorous life of being American. So anyway, that is Chapter 7, talking about what are the characteristics of pop culture, how we can respond to that by consuming or resisting that, and then also how pop culture ends up representing other cultural groups that we have to be really careful with. So just be really aware and think through, like, your reaction to pop culture. How inundated are you? What does that look like? Where do your stereotypes come from? Do you have stereotypes of other countries, and where is that from? It might be from a movie or a magazine or a book or just one actor, right? Jackie Chan is not the only Chinese person, right? So just kind of look through that. All right, so that's Chapter 7 in a nutshell.